first of all, I'm tremendously honored to be in this campus. I made several attempts in the past to get here. Finally, I made it, and very much thanks to your leadership that I'm very thrilled to be in this audience. Certainly, I would like to welcome all PhD students, the first sense of Poland Corps, in this beautiful environment. I'm not known to be. First of all, I think the best part will come with Q&A, because that's when I can tell you the whole truth. Because still, speeches are being prepared, and you always have some decisions what you put on the paper. However, I'm not being known for being a diplomatic speaker. But in the past, I've often used the tricks of diplomacy to soften or even hide what I really deeply thought inside my heart. But I think that's not going to be the case today, because you are young, and I'm sure young people, you are idealistic. That's the most important thing. You care more about truth than about political correctness. You want to go to the core of the matters. And in a way, I still discovered through very pragmatically from my political career, the best policy, the best pragmatic policy still is to tell the truth. As you know, I'm still president until presidential elections later in the fall this year. Parliamentary elections have brought new majority to the government of my country, and I can, as it hasn't happened, it should happen in every democracy. And by itself, it's a good thing that we had smooth elections. We had very smooth transition. Exemplary one in a way, because we had old ministers working with new candidates for a month of transition, decisions taken together. We gave more power to new government, and it was what we were obliged by constitution. We gave up even recently the right to president to dissolve the government, to make the most room, to free the most room for new government. But at the same time, I have to say that now as never, the region is at crossroads. We always saw history as a dialectics in good direction. So the idea was that in the 90s, when I first time went, it was mentioned I went to different schools in Europe. First time when I went to Strasbourg in 1991, it was still the Soviet Union, to take my first course at the Human Rights Institute in Strasbourg. And I had an internship at the Council of Europe. And that was the moment when I was there together with Polish students, and we, in order to get internship at the Council of Europe, which was exclusively a Western club, and many of you might not even know what the Council of Europe is doing today, because it's kind of sidelined once you're already in the European Union and other places. But when we were there together with Polish students, we had to get several weeks of security clearance, because we were considered a potential danger for this Western institution. It was 91. It was not a long time ago from my perspective. From your perspective, where many of you might be not born. And the thing was that there was first enlargement in the 90s. First Poland and other Central and Eastern European countries made it. Then there was second wave when Baltic countries made it. We missed both trains. But then we had, in 2003, Georgia Rose Revolution. We had Orange Revolution in Ukraine. I wrote an article back then in Financial Times calling it the third wave of liberation of Europe. And we thought everything is going in the right directions. We had first ones, second ones, now third ones. We joined NATO, the European Union. Everything will go in the right direction. Russia will also democratize meanwhile and go parallel. And everything looked very smooth and nice, and the prospects we have ahead of us very bright. However, we missed several points here. Oil prices went up, and so does this kind of belligerence of our Russian neighbor. America got into trouble in the Middle East first, and then in big economic crisis. It was followed by European economic crisis, and things turned out not to be as smooth as we thought, also in our part of the world. And so the point here was that Georgia developed, we did our homework. We developed with tremendous speed. We had double-digit growth for most of the time, my government's administration. We became, according to the European Union, the country with lowest corruption in Europe. We became the country with lowest crime rate in Europe. These are all European Union figures. We went to all the way from being 137 in terms of doing business ratings of the World Bank to being number 9. First time ever a developing country had made the top 10 of that list. Very elite list headed by Singapore, Hong Kong, US, Denmark, Sweden, and then somewhere on 9th, Georgia, after us, Iceland, Germany, and all the others. We managed to reduce poverty by 60%. We totally reshaped the country. It really looks very different. It looks very modern. I would have claimed that out of new countries new democracies in Europe, the fastest progress I see is here in Warsaw and in our Georgia city. And so we thought that everything is going in the right direction. But all of this did not prevent the return of power of some of old forces, even disguised as a new coalition with new flags and some new leaders. And all of this did not overcome the disruptive influence of old structures in Georgia. As you all know, reformist forces were confronted, and all this time were confronted by Kremlin and satellites in our region. The hostility is the same in every country, however, in Georgia it reached the same height, the highest ground. And why did it happen? Why did Georgian war happen in 2008? Because Russia saw something that they thought would never happen: emergence of a modern state in the Caucasus. I remember Catherine the Great writing to German Emperor Frederick saying that, we should never allow Poland to do reforms because Poland might eventually emerge as a strong state. And this was seen as a threat that freedom-loving people can develop their genuine state. Now, we were together in Russian Empire, and Russia did its best to freeze development in Poland when we were in Russian Empire. But they brought, by the way, downtown of Tbilisi is built by Polish engineers, architects, lots of Polish business people were there, cultural figures. They brought them there because they thought savage Caucasus is not a threat. They can never develop. We can make our nice new place in the Caucasus and use all these Poles with their skills to build something that can never be a real country anyway. And what we defied really in Georgia, what was the biggest problem for them, that suddenly we started to look at a real state. It started to look at a real state. It started to look, first of all, like to remain. There are two main tools for which, let's say, in today's world, in post-Soviet world, Russia has no visible soft power left. They cannot really attract with the level of fast development of their economy, or even the cultural aspects are somehow have been sidelined, etc. But there are two things where there is another level of influence which is out there. This is criminal world, and this is corruption. And this mutual influence is almost like mutual, because some big part of organized crime bosses in Russia were ethnically Georgian and still are. So after Georgia, Russia stopped all the imports from Georgia of all our products. The criminal bosses were the only things that were actively exporting there. And corruption should never be underestimated, because there's another level of understanding which people, at which level people understand each other in the post-Soviet world, and where Russia is absolute dominant. Because there is this thing where Russians can always make way around, and they can know how to control fruits. Georgia became not only the least corrupt in the post-Soviet world. According to every post, 0.1% of Georgians said they encountered corruption. When 8 years ago, 98 said it, same thing. But Georgia also became the safest country in Europe, safest country and the least corrupt country in Europe, according to different figures. We were safer than Iceland, had 5 times less crime rate than Russia, 4.5 times less than Ukraine, etc. We became another world in this old world of Soviet and post-imperial power. And
And the problem for Russia was not our foreign policy, because people now often say, well, you wanted to go, you were poking their eyes. Also, lots of people in America or Europe would say, don't irritate them too much with your NATO aspirations. The biggest problem for Russia was not Georgian foreign minister. The biggest problem was Georgian interior minister. Fighting with corruption. The biggest problem was Georgian tax collection agency. We managed to create transparent economic system with all the problems, but it was still transparent economic system. So the problem was that when Vladimir Putin told me, our guy should be your security minister, I didn't say anything, but the guy was immediately fired when I came back. This was the essential trouble we had with them. Not the fact, we had the same trouble as Poland potentially had with Catherine, the Empress of Russia, that Georgia defied their expectations in its Caucasus for the first time, and modern state was created. And to the level when Medvedev had to say several times last year, and this is the same Medvedev who said Saakashvili is a cadaver, he's dead. Putin explained exactly the same ways how I would be hanged by different parts of my body, what they would exactly do, how many parts they would cut me and dismember me. After that, 4 years later, Medvedev said, I hate Saakashvili, but we have to acknowledge they did amazing reforms and we have to learn from them and apply them in Russia, quote unquote. So, what other precedent there is in world history when country that, such a big country that basically thought that they totally destroyed a small country, tried to do it 4 years ago, 4 years later we do this thing. By the way, we should learn from this country that was supposed to disappear and to be fully annihilated. We have to learn from them how to rule our own country. Where Russians, after economic embargo, after which we had 13% growth, after energy embargo, after which after several years of we were importing 80% of our energy from Russia, and 3-4 years later we restructured our sector, we started to export our electricity to Russia. After all these things, nothing worked, and then the war came. Now, people were saying, and the primitive thing in Western press was, oh, Georgia was attacked by the big neighbor, or Georgia was promptly defeated, many people would say. But let's look at what happened strategically. And what happened strategically was very simple. Russia controlled most of the territory they are controlling now. Already prior to war, from early 90s, when the Soviet Union was dissolving, they kind of stirred up trouble. They played a behind-the-scenes role there, but they controlled de facto, as so-called peacekeepers, these 20% of our territory. The only thing they gained further in 2008 were several villages. Every village of us that is very precious to my heart. I had personally heavily invested emotionally in those villages to develop infrastructure to show difference. But that's what they gained territorially for the time being. But what they lost is a role of peacekeepers. The whole world started to denounce them as occupied. So strategically, they didn't win. What it also showed the whole post-Soviet world was that you can defy Russia, and you can still walk like a person, not with all parts of your body intact. You can still develop very fast your economy, because that's exactly when our economic boom also started, despite the world economic crisis, especially for the last 3 years. And you can still go on with European and NATO integration. Already the fall this year, we had clear prospect to get EU perspective for Moldova and Georgia. That would be a geopolitical coup. And clearly, at the last Chicago summit, in her conclusive speech, Hillary Clinton, but also some of other NATO leaders said, next summit will be a larger summit, and Georgia is #1 candidate. That was a huge opportunity. But then what happened that what Russia could not get through embargoes, for blackmail, from terrorist attacks. It's very well documented. They had dozens of terrorist attacks orchestrated inside their territory directly by the security services, killing scores of people. They basically attacked the civilian targets, obviously. And after the war, we had elections. And of course, Georgian people had their own motivation, how they voted, and this was not motivation connected to ceding our sovereignty in no way. However, the days of elections, 1 week before elections, they escalated the biggest ever training in our own territory, inside our own territory. The legend of that training officially was taking of Tbilisi, and absolutely unambiguously it was linked to our elections. Basically, the choice Russians gave us: either we want the way we want you to, or else. But there are many other factors. This was this kind of blackmail might have been some kind of factor, but there are many others: social, economic. There was a prison scandal related to human rights abuses in prison. Fatigue with fast pace of reforms. Of course, some people felt sidelined. Old structures were still quite strong. Anyway, so we had the result as we had. But before that, same thing happened in Ukraine, in Georgia. Then it was recently Moldova, and now there is a huge pressure for exactly financial leverages on Azerbaijan, which is a very key strategic point because it gives access to Europe, for Europe to strategic energy lines in Central Asia. Huge pressure exactly for financial means. So in the end, they found the exact way to benefit from the situation in mind. And so, we are talking about the economy of, in Georgia's case, of less than 30 billion euros. And you get a candidate which only for election campaign got additional 2 billion just in the amount for elections. So, and this is no country in the world which has been this. But things happen. And things happen this way in democracy, they can happen in another way, provided that you keep democracy. Because provided you don't get through democratic means somebody who would then, by their undemocratic instinct, kill the basic institutions of democracy. That's what is at stake right now. 2 days ago, the elected Prime Minister of Georgia announced that he will launch an investigation in 2008 war and already pronounced the verdict stating that my government had started the war and that the invaded country was guilty, not the invader. I recently reread a book called The Second World War. I mean, it's newly published, but I read it already the second time. Imagine, I recommend it if you don't see that. Very interesting book about history, and there are lots of similarities. Imagine Polish government immediately in the aftermath of German invasion. Of course, Germany said Poland attacked Germany, of course. Why would they attack first, right? Soviet Union claimed that Finland attacked Soviet Union. They had to respond. They were victims of aggression. Imagine Polish government in the aftermath of September of 1939 coming out, or any major Polish politician, but this time head of Polish government, saying, by the way, we were at fault. We provoked the Soviet Union. We were misbehaving. By the way, yeah, we attacked Germans. Yes. So we'll prosecute everybody who did it. We are so sorry. It's funny and it never happened. But because it's funny, because it never happened. It's not funny for me because it's happening in my country. And so the reality is that this certainly, well, they also announced that, of course, I will be personally investigated, but that's, my personal case has strictly no importance. Even if you will agree that such announcement does not contribute to any democratic cohabitation. But what is at stake is much more important. What is at stake is sovereignty of my nation. When the leader of a country that is partially occupied, that counts 500,000 IDPs that were ethnically cleansed from their towns and villages, repeats the same story that the invader who expelled that people and who keeps them away from returning to their homes, repeats the propaganda of occupiers and ethnic cleansers, and announce that those ones who tried to resist the invader are to be blamed and tried and finally sentenced, then you understand that this is a sovereignty issue. This is where we are now, unfortunately. Russian influence is coming back gradually to our security services structures. And of course, corruption fight also has now big problems. The very people who were successfully in charge of fighting Russian security penetration are being investigated. Some of them have been apprehended and arrested. You might think, by the way, that, again, as I said, corruption is what it has to do with it. Political leverage, it is direct leverage when you have corrupt structures. They are very easy to penetrate. Why were not easy to penetrate? Because there was new generation and they were not corrupt. They had no personal links with Russia anymore and they were not corrupt. Nobody wants to have problems with their neighbors. We were the ones who unilaterally lifted visa ban on Russian tourists because there is the strict visa requirements for Georgian citizens going to Russia. We had almost 1 million scheduled, I don't know the final figures, to visit Georgia last year. We supported Russia's WTO bid because Georgia was the last remaining country to decide it. And also initially, I had lots of naive expectations that I would embrace Russian leadership, fight together against terrorism. So we had our small problems, they had their big neighbor, we could accommodate in our way their own issues, and we would be treated normally. Well, I was wrong. Because there's this clear line where the pragmatic approaches are important, and you should have them, and where they end and where your basic survival, independence, and sovereignty starts. And 2 days ago, when they announced that we are to be blamed for war, and the only other officials in the world that announced that before was Hugo Chavez, obviously, and every single Russian official. Russia's response was very cynical. They said, oh, that's nice that they finally acknowledged it, admitted it, what we were always telling, we always told you so. There's a big celebration in Russian official media for the last 48 hours. Still continuing, it's like big festivity. We'll never give you back your territories, forget about them. We'll develop with you sports, cultural, and economic relations. But one thing, we had Russian embargo last year, and we grew 9%. Russian embargo partially might be lifted this year, but this year we are projecting very little, if any, growth. Even this myth that these trade relations are indispensable for our economic development was disapproved by Georgia, because next year after Russia's full-blown economic embargo, we had 13% growth. Why did we do it? Because of absence of corruption, easy business framework, and general defense of general freedoms. They are the keys for economic growth, more than just even necessary, indispensable, but simple good relation with any neighbor. Although, of course, it's good to have these good relations. Prosperity does not come through submission, but through democracy and stability. My dear friends, I had to share my concerns, but I will end with the idea that strong Europe will continue to enlarge. It's just a temporary period. There was this perception, maybe not always justified, that America somehow withdrew from the region, that Europe very clearly is in economic crisis, and so there was this window of opportunities for imperial part of Russia to take over, but nothing is static. When we talk about Russia, we say, oh yeah, we have these issues, and we sometimes say Russia is static. Shale gas in 5 years from now will transform, it's already doing that, but it's not so evident yet for everybody. In 5 years it will be clear for everybody. The main tool they had for domination will be taken out of their hands. Gazprom is already panicking. You can see it very clearly if you watch. Their West Russian rearmament program, which was based on the main source, is Tokman gas field that we are going to sell to America. So they are going to sell to America. This is like according to Lenin, who said that capitalists will give us the cord on which we'll hang them. They were going to sell the gas from Stockholm to the United States and other Canada, and that would give them money to rearm their army and to dominate their neighbor. But Stockholm is out because America is shale gas. And America is becoming exporter itself. America will be back because American economy will come back on this energy and other issues. Europe will overcome the crisis, and Russia has big issues with internal stability because they never offered their new big ideas of their people. They never offered the modernization, and now they're out of main leverage, or they will soon lose it. But we need to survive in this window in these few years now. We need to stop this wave of takeovers, of rolling back what we thought was third wave of liberation of Europe. And we need to be in good shape for the time when, these clouds will go away and the sun will shine again in a better way. That from that point of view, if we keep democratic framework, European choice of Georgia is irreversible. Because no Georgian constituents would say we want to go away from Europe. I mean, Georgians are not just pro-European, they're enthusiastic pro-European. But what might happen, theoretically, saying, well, Europe doesn't want us anymore. NATO and NATO was always a need. Now we are out of money. So what is left? Maybe Russia will still give us a few billions for our populist promises. And because they are not taking us, maybe they should consider other choices. That is the principal danger, not that people will ever want. That's why principles stand from all of us is important. Saying things clearly is very important. Georgia's further into European integration on clear principles, engaging Georgian principles is very important. Because Georgia was a beacon of, a place there are people here from Ukraine, from other places, and they know that, in your countries, in Ukraine, Moldova, Central Asia, especially, but also in Russia, Georgia has become an example of what in most hopeless situations, how we can overcome them and make it. Well, we were an example until very recently. But if we keep democratic framework, we'll still become even much more shining example than before. But for that, we need your help. For that, Poland is essential, because one new European reality is the following. We always had big players in Europe deciding many things, and this was obviously Germany and France as well. There are other big European states, but obviously for terms of political weight, this was clear who was, it's still clear who are the lead players. But finally, in the last several years especially, new realities emerging, and on the Eastern Front, Poland is becoming potentially a new European big power. Absolutely new reality for Poland, but for all of us. Because nobody understands it better than me. And nowhere I feel more at home besides my own country than here in Warsaw. And so, from that point of view, being here and talking to you is also hope for the future, because what our enemies of democracy and freedom want, they want to destroy the framework we created, and if they manage to do it, then hard time is in front of us, the times of chaos and despair. But if we stay alert, if we never give up, and my favorite quote for all times, and it's not, I don't think he invented it, but Winston Churchill, never, 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 never give up. And we are, when I read this book about Poland, when the way how we were fighting, in all directions, in absolute desperate state, with everybody, because everybody was fighting with you, not because you attacked us. Everybody wanted to squeeze out Poland from existence. Because Poles were so brave, because Poles were so desperate in fighting for freedom, because their Poles were so talented. And you didn't give up, and here you are. And we will never not give up, and we'll join you. Thank you.
prepared my question on paper because I'm really nervous.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, it's not so long. It's a difficult question. So I will start by saying that I really admire you.
Thank you.
As a president, you are, as you said, you are an example for Moldavia, but for all the Eastern countries, and the changes that you made. And they were like real changes. We had our prime minister here, and he didn't manage to do half of what you did. And I wanted to ask you something about the elections and about why you lost the elections. Let's say that you brought the economical reasons and Russia, but the party was not re-elected by the people, by the Georgian people. So Putin, in a declaration before becoming president in 2000, was saying that the Russian people is not prepared for democracy after 70 years of totalitarianism and authoritarianism. And I see in the region that, as you said, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova is following. European neighborhood policy is not really helping in that, and maybe the real issue is not about geopolitics, but it's somehow civil society, which is maybe not prepared for taking over democracy that is in Western societies or in European. So this will be like, this is my question, if you think that it's the society in Georgia that is not prepared for democracy.
Question, a very legitimate hesitation or reflection you might get when, and especially in our country when you have ups and downs. But remember, the countries we admire today for being great democracies or for being successful and advanced had very hard times as well, and had lots of ups and downs. And so there are no people. One thing we should agree on culturally and politically, we are the same space, unmistakably. And say when you are talking about, you mentioned Moldova. I see we had lots of meetings with lots of young Moldovan young people. Absolute new generation. Totally new, very different in habits and things. They traveled a lot, they studied a lot around, they've seen things. The same thing happened emerged in my country last decade. And so what I'm saying is that there are things that already have been planted that are different, starting from, new education, body language of people, new buildings. I have claimed that we have the best new architecture, at least in Europe. And most of the people also hate us for that, but that's okay. And so what I'm saying is that, and the new government came with programs demolishing buildings. It's amazing. And they started step by step a little bit to do it. Hopefully they'll stop there. But what the point here is that people only can be educated on democracy through the process of democracy. So if this was us explaining to people, oh, this is good for you, this is bad. Now they will learn it firsthand. We were warning them about the risk. Now they will see those risks being in real life, right? And even in Singapore, we always cite Georgia as an example for Singapore because of liberal economy and fast development and also new buildings and new cities coming up. But Singapore today couldn't have made the same thing because today we're 21st century, social media, everything you cannot have single party rule with one newspaper and one television channel and one person speaking on it. It's gone, those types, for good, hopefully. What we have now is multitude of voices, and it's everywhere, but especially in Europe, it's like that. So what I'm saying is that, in our case, what people were promised, we confronted powerful idea of communism, which is, you don't have to, we had a candidate that told people, you don't have to do anything. You might stay home, not work hard. Why you have to work? I like you as you are, because we were telling them, we should work harder, we should become new Singapore, we should become new, like advanced European countries. And the other countries said, I like you as you are, don't worry. And the way that they're saying we should change, they don't like you, they hate you. Which of course was not true, but that's their propaganda, right? So we told people we should do better because we want to love them and we want them to live better. Then the others told them, you should stay as you are. Just stay home, we'll feed you. You don't believe us? Look at my bank account. By the way, Berlusconi did the same trick in Italy, so it's true we are not unique when I talk about which is like countries ready for democracy or not. So So when we are saying that, we have this notion now, and so where we are, that people will discover firsthand that there is no free lunch or free dinner or free anything. You have to work for it. And second thing, Minister Lavrov 2 days ago again explained to our parliament. They said, you think that by, finally giving in on main issue that who started the war and menacing to halt your hated by us is responsible for it. You think you'll get back territories? No, you will not get back territories. You'll get cultural trade ties. You can sell some more wine to Russia, and we'll send you maybe Red Army chorus to sing in Georgia, perform. And so the point here is that then we discovered that just making eyes to the Russians is not going to solve our problem. That the problem was not the rhetoric or the dislike, or the Putin disliked my physical parameters or something. No. The problem was much more fundamental. So, and how do you do this process of education? Also through democracy. Democracy creates this. And that's how, we had ups and downs, but we will have to have our own ups and downs with the democratic system. And eventually, still, we'll move forward. That's my deep conviction. There is no better system than that.
My name is Veronica, and I'm a student from Ukraine. And I also must say that I have a very special relationship with Georgia, because my fiancé is Georgian. So I travel very often, and I know.
I would be surprised otherwise. Come on.
Yeah, I call it the second home, actually. And yes, as somebody who really knows the country and the region and who cares, I want to ask a question, which is probably a little bit philosophical, but I would really like to have your opinion on that. You also mentioned at the beginning that we are young and therefore idealistic, and yes, we are, we try to be. And for me personally, the ideal is peace. And my question therefore would be related to the fact that we all have our share of responsibility in what is happening in this world. And therefore it's very interesting to know what is your opinion, what the next generation of Georgian politicians should do to contribute to bring finally peace, not only to Georgia, but to the region in general, because I believe that it's impossible to maintain peace if it will not be everywhere in the South Caucasus. And also in the sense that how do you think, what should be done in order that the war becomes impossible in South Caucasus as it today in Western Europe and in EU in general? What kind of discourse would you suggest for the future generation of
Well, I fully agree with you. First of all, about idealism. I remember very well when I went to see President Yushchenko immediately in the aftermath of Orange Revolution. He was not feeling well. We went to ski in the Carpathian Mountains, and we wanted to sign joint declaration and have joint press conferences. We tried to do it during 1 week, like 7 or 8 times, and every time he got sick until last minute, we had found window of 20 minutes when he could stand on his feet. So I know how difficult was the start there, but I remember that ski resort when we were going around, obviously, people, so much euphoria, so much youthful energy, such a relaxed atmosphere in the air. You had the feeling everything was doable, everything was possible. Of course, things turned sour in many ways after that, but I never lost that feeling of what I experienced in Ukraine back then. And I think it can be brought back, and it will be brought back, and it's already brought back by your generation. Both from east and west of Ukraine, by the way. And I see more and more Eastern Ukrainians along those lines in the young generation. Now, I think the response to the thing is how you get peace is through democracy. Because democracy makes it very difficult to fight war. Very difficult. If Russia had been democracy, it would have been very hard to openly fight war even with small neighbor like Georgia. Because the point here is that when you have multitude of voices and when people know that they can be held accountable later for things and they cannot hide things, they can manipulate things, they cannot create their own version of story, then it's easier to maintain peace. And also for development. when Russian tanks were ravaging through our territory in 2008, you know, on the way they were, I remember these images of them running over modern Georgian police cars, entering into new Georgian glass administrative buildings, and it looked weird, it looked bizarre, it looked obsolete. When you have modernity and development, I was always saying, I had the feeling that Russia might have attacked us for some time already before 2008, and I was saying, let's build fast, let's do things. Our best defense will be glass skyscrapers, not just air defenses. And I still believe in it very strongly. Because democracy and power with development makes it very, very hard in today's world. Despite all these stereotypes and old habits that die hard, still things do change. And still I think that, you know, where there is violence and things, where there is a social poverty, there is a social injustice, there is absence of debate, and the one man can, or woman, whatever, but usually these are men, can take bad decisions. So that's I think universal recipe. Look at the world. Do the democracies really fight wars anywhere? Not really. You need at least one part of the thing, usually the aggressor, to be on the dictatorial side.
Sorry?
You come from?
I come from Belgium, sorry. My name is Seven. My question is, why, Mr. President, are there no flights between the two capitals? Doesn't it say so very much about the real absence of any meaningful relations? Today there are no NGOs that are easily cooperating together. There are no businesses that can easily expand. And so I have a question, because I think it's really important, as it was said before, to really strong and bolster the relations between Caucasian republics. So I wanted to have your opinion about it. Thank you very much.
The only right fact you said was that there are no flights. There is explanation to that. Why there is? I mean, we are too close, geographic proximity, and it makes it very expensive to operate flights. But I would love to. Sometimes we had them, but they never were profitable. I'm very proud that for the last 8 years, Georgian-Armenian relationship became close at people-to-people level. That's much more important, because relations at the level of governments were always good. These are two Christian neighbors that never fought the war in their thousands years of old history of cohabitation, living next to each other. That's already telling you the core of things about our relations. Very close and friendly culture to each other. But the point here is that every year, every fifth Armenian citizen, visits Georgia. Every fourth Armenian citizen visits Georgia. And that's a huge breakthrough. And so basically this is the main gateway for Armenians, not only to the rest of the world, but it's also the main place to go to. And that really changed the whole equation of relations. With regards to Armenian businesses, you come to downtown Tbilisi, I'll take you to at least 10 cafes that are opened by Armenians, because I go there regularly. But this is only a tip of an iceberg. I mean, it's part of, they're everywhere, because Georgia has become the easiest place of doing business in Eastern and Central Europe. I know Poland had to claim the same thing, but I have to disappoint you that according to every estimate, until recently, Georgia was the one to do it. And so, from that point of view, obviously, lots of Armenian companies, also and companies from the region, because Georgia has become a hub, have benefited from it. Georgia's double-digit growth was driven by FDI, and the FDI was coming from all directions, including Armenia. So these are the things. Also it's true that on the war issue, while Armenia's foreign policy is very close in many ways to Russian foreign policy, they took clear autonomy. I was invited to Yerevan immediately after the war. Obviously, they refused to recognize any of these territories, like any other former Soviet state, but they also, I was given their highest medal, I was given opportunity to address public speeches, lots of questions were asked. It was a very relaxed and friendly atmosphere. I will never forget that, because it happened immediately in the aftermath, and it was clearly a very gesture of independent foreign policy from Armenian authorities at that point.
My name is Jakub Lachert, I'm a student from Poland. I would like to ask you a question of the cooperation between Georgia and the European Union in the framework of Eastern Partnership. What do you think personally about this project? that is the countries like which has the aspiration, the EU aspiration like Georgia.
I attended many CIS meetings. I can testify that they were just, formalities. You just gather together, have banquet, and go back home without any meaningful discussion. And we needed our own multilateral format. These countries were to come together and talk to each other. It also, in situation for us when we left CIS, it was the way for us to talk to people that we would otherwise not meet except the bilateral framework. So it was a very useful response. I think it's still a very useful response. I think it has lots of future. Obviously, the last takeover of or rollback of certain things in this region, which I described, slows things down, unfortunately, but not for good. I mean, this framework will be kept, and eventually it will be absolute decisive factor, not only in changing these countries and these areas, but also eventually changing Russian Federation to the better. And from that point of view, it was Polish-Swedish initiative. This is another, but essentially Poland is still the main driver. And this is exactly what I was talking about, that Poland has become and is becoming not only leader for all of us, but the leader in Europe. And that should be, and if you talk about, if we ask me what is the biggest hope for me for the future, nearest future, is strengthening Polish role in Europe. That makes life much easier for all of us.
My name is Christina. I'm also coming from Moldova. My question relates to democracy in Georgia and to reforming. So the assessment of Georgia's performance is undoubtedly the reforms that you have made so far, especially in the economic or justice or police field, are taken as models for a lot of countries, mainly for those coming from the post-Soviet space. However, there are divergent equal voices. Some of them state the efforts that have been made so far in the economic and the institutional field, and the others still put out on the mistakes that have been made on the home affairs and the if to say it correctly, the exaggerated power that have been observed in the recent years. So my question, especially maybe in the light that a lot of experts, especially from Ukraine, from Moldova, states that such reforms in such a short period of time, it cannot be possible without illegal means. So my question is justified to make reforms using illegal means, and here I'm referring to the infringements that have been observed by the international organizations on human rights. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, no, our response to that is that I think reforms can also work in democracy once there's a public consensus. And if you don't have public consensus, no matter what you suppress, it's not going to work. The biggest problem, challenge, or like temptation for governments, and I test it now in Georgian reality, is that, if we make all this media to shut up, and we have this direct, I'm not exaggerating, we hear these things rhetoric in Georgia, the opposition should shut up, and then they will not be arrested. Media should shut up, and they will not shut them down. If opposition disappears, if media shuts up, then the government really will have very hard time. And I'll tell you why. Because it's a small society. It's not like huge Russia. You can, it's a marketplace principle. You go in the street, say things, and it spreads. Social media is there, cannot be suppressed. My son was in China to learn Mandarin, and we know that in China there are some certain restrictions on using internet, right? He figured out within like first half an hour how to use it without any problem. I mean, so that really is telling you that these things don't work anymore. They never worked in my experience. But then, what happened in Georgia, the best response was last elections. Because we not only had fast reforms, but from time to time, unlike Singapore authorities, we asked our people, unlike Singapore authorities in the past, by the way, do you also want to carry us on? I resigned in 2007 after rallies. I resigned. And called for new elections. You paid attention maybe that my friend said that, first election I got 96%, the second 53%, right? Because I resigned. lots of people were disgruntled by reforms, and I said, okay, it's up to you to tell me whether you want continuation of these reforms or not, and only 54% decided that they want to continue the reforms, but it was still the majority. Third time around, they decided they wanted to discontinue some of the things. So what I'm saying is that, but after all these things, that when we had smooth transition, I remember one usually very skeptical German publication that usually denounced it, and I think most of the time grossly exaggerate the things that you are implying or referring to. They had an editorial after our elections with title, "So Saakashvili turned out to be a Democrat after all." So that's, I think, sums up the whole thing, you know.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Eva Ośniewska-Tomecka, Vice Rector of the College of Europe, will now offer a vote of thanks.
Mr. President Saakashvili, on behalf of the College of Europe and its Natolin campus, which invited you a long time ago, I want to thank you most warmly for this inspiring and thought-provoking address, and for your presence, first of all, here today. Your generosity to come to speak to us underlines the importance of our work in furthering knowledge about the European Union, and as well as its nearest neighbors, their aspirations and ambitions, which we do share very much, Mr. President. It is a powerful symbol of the close connection between the College of Europe Natolin campus and your country. As a sign of our gratitude and our friendship, I would like to present to you the painting from Natolin, hoping that it will inspire you to come back. This is the Natolin. Come back here when you have more.
He's got a job.
You know, I'm collecting.
He's got a job.
Yeah, I was collecting job offers, so I got one.
This is the
you know, this is the best bank. I was offered to be a tractorist, and now it's professor. So I have to choose between driving a tractor and teaching to these beautiful students here. So the wonderful audiences. But in any case, I'm very grateful for this. I mean, this is you go usually. For all these years, when you go to our official visits, you learn to be, first of all, unemotional about them. You learn to be, first you learn that they are more and more tiring usually, and that usually you kind of want to leave any country very fast. Poland is, for me, the only exception in general, because this is the country from which we always take back positive energy. Because this is the country that has this spirit which we also want to have in my country. This is the country that also contributes to save our statehood and continue to contribute to it. And can you imagine what a double special effect to be in Poland, and to be in Poland with you, with the best youth from all over the region. Thank you again for this wonderful opportunity. And you know, I don't know whether I'll come to teach here, but certainly you should come and visit our country, and you should certainly learn from our experience, our mistakes, and as well as I'm sure we all will learn from you in the future. You'll be the future leaders of Europe and the world. Thank you.